One of those words that we would place high up on the vocabulary list of the church, a sacred word that speaks of the very heart of God, is the word grace. It is another way that we speak about the character of God's love, that may be the simplest and most important thing we ever say about God is that God is love. And grace comes out of that love. It is all the ways in which our lives are gifted to us, that we experience God's love. Whether we are looking back on the years behind us or mindful in the moments around us or prayerful about the days to come, that grace is found at the very heart of God's love. And depending on how we say that word, it can sound so heavenly that we cannot imagine ever wrapping our hands around it. But it is important to remember, grace comes to us in the flesh in the same way that Jesus did. That it helps us flesh out what we mean when we say God is love, that we use words about God's love to describe it like unmerited or unconditional, that God's love is endless or absolutely relentless, that God's grace helps us describe God's love. It's all the ways in which God has given us the gift of life, or life anew, or surprised us in ways we never imagined. When we talk about God's grace, we usually emphasize that it's a gift, that it comes without condition, that it cannot be earned, that there are no strings attached. And that's why God's grace can sound so heavenly that we can't wrap our hands around it. The danger is when we try to bring God's grace down to earth, to flesh it out like we see in the life of Jesus, there is that danger of believing it is too good to be true. That sure, it is a gift, that we cannot earn it, but when we bring it down to earth, we start to put stipulations on it. Whether we are talking about receiving the grace of God, and we start to determine that we've earned God's grace in some way, or whether it's when we're trying to give God's grace to others and we put conditions on it, or make it merited in some way. That it can sound so heavenly that when we bring it down to earth and flesh it out, we make it into something that it's not. That it is a gift that is not earned, that has no strings attached, that comes out of the unconditional, the unmerited love of God. In some ways, we can treat grace like fine china. It sits up in the piece of furniture where you can see it on display, but you never use it. That it sits up there just for special occasions, when certain people come to the house to eat. But grace is meant to be used day in and day out. That sitting up there on display, it just seems heavenly. But grace is more like the everyday plates that we have dinner on, or the normal silverware that we don't have to polish. That its beauty, its gift, is in its use. And interesting, every year the dictionary decides to put new words in the lexicon. For example, in 2019, Merriam-Webster added a bunch of new words, 640 to the dictionary. Words like unplug, which means refraining from electronic devices. It added the word screen time, which no longer means the number of minutes that an actor is on the big screen in a Hollywood blockbuster. It means how many minutes we are sitting in front of a computer screen or tablet throughout the day. It added the word gig economy, where temporary workers are hired in the service sector. That the dictionary simply reflects what words are used and how they are used in the current culture, which begs the question, how should we use the word grace? So it is not so heavenly, sitting up there on display, but rather it's like the everyday plates and silverware that we use each night at dinner. Well, first, it's important to say that grace is good, but it is also hard. That something can be good and hard at the very same time, because love always is. Love is good and love is hard. It's why it changes us. It's why it changes others. It's why it is so important in this world. And it is the same with grace. It is both good and hard. But in order to avoid it feeling so heavenly, we also need to say, grace is practical. Grace is practical like the everyday plates and silverware we use at dinner. That whenever we enjoy the food that we eat, or share in laughter with others, or reflect on our memories and valuable experiences of our lives, we are thinking about God's grace. All of the goodness that we find throughout creation. It is the food we have to eat, or the clothes we have to wear, the community that we can share, the friendship we have to embrace, or even the assistance we receive or give to others. That grace is good and it is hard, but it is also practical. It is always life-giving, because love is always life-giving. That any gift that we receive that is life-giving to us, or any gift we offer to others that is life-giving to them, it is a spark of God's grace in this world. And it's a gift that retains its vitality by giving it away. That even if we are the ones to receive grace, the only way for us to hold on to grace in our lives is to give it away at the same time. In many ways, it's like that instrument that sits in the corner of the room collecting dust. It's an important item in our lives. It's been passed down through our family. It's quite beautiful to look upon, but it's something very different to pick it up and to play it. That we hold on to the gift of grace by giving it away. Because when we give it away, we experience it again and again, over and over in our lives as we offer it to others. That in some ways, as we offer it, we receive it. And as we receive it, we offer it. It's because grace comes out of the love of God, which does the same. That grace has the grand ability of metamorphosis. It changes shape and size depending on what is needed in the situation. It comes to us in friendship and in food. We experience it as welcome in our loneliness or warmth on a cold night, that we can express it in laughter or in tears. It comes in all shapes and sizes, but it is always shared with others, rooted in God. It always produces gratitude and generosity, and in every case, it is life-giving. So we strive to say the word of grace in those ways. That we always want to discover a more robust, a deeper sense of what that word means, because it tethers us to the very heart of God. Amen.